Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about what if wargames. Are they historical or fantasy? This week I want to discuss the question of whether historical wargamers can still call themselves historical when they play alternative or what if scenarios. Now, in the traditional sense, historical wargaming involves recreating battles, campaigns or skirmishes based on documented history, using the figures, tactics and terrain known to have been present at the time. And this approach aims to replicate historical circumstances as closely as possible within the limitations of a tabletop game. However, the concept of a what-if scenario takes history as a starting point, then branches off into imagined outcomes or alternative confrontations. For instance, rather than reenacting the Battle of Bosworth as it occurred in 1485, one might alter elements, perhaps location, timing or reinforcements available, to explore new strategies and potential outcomes. And in doing so, the focus shifts from strict historical recreation to imaginative reinterpretation, raising the question of whether such games could still be called historical. So when I reflect on my own gaming history, it's clear that a substantial number of the war games I have played are not strict historical recreations, but rather what-if battles set within historical contexts. So for example, I recently designed an alternative version of the Battle of Bosworth, as mentioned earlier, imagining that the showdown between Richard III and Henry Tudor took place near Lichfield, rather than at the actual location where the historians believe the battle occurred. The choice to adapt the battle's location introduced a new dynamic, while still adhering to the weapons and tactics and figures typical of the 15th century. Now, other variations that I'm considering for this game, for future games, are based on different maps created by the historians and antiquarians over the last few hundred years, adding a level of informed speculation to the experience. Now, these what-if scenarios are designed not just to deviate from history, but to create unique challenges and opportunities for the players. This approach brings out different strategies, enhances games' replayability, adding a layer of intellectual engagement as players consider how small changes might have impacted on a significant historical event. The fact that I have planned several alternative Bosworth scenarios also reflects the appeal of these speculative setups. By slightly altering factors, one can explore various what might have been possibilities, gaining insights into the forces at play while reusing familiar figures and settings. In this way, what-if scenarios offer a kind of historical sandbox that allows for both deep immersion in the period and creative flexibility. Now, a critical question then is whether these scenarios remain historical or drift into the realm of fantasy wargaming. Now, fantasy games of course typically involve settings, characters and events that are entirely fictional, often incorporating elements like magic, mythical creatures and otherworldly realms. What-if scenarios, however, by contrast, are based on historical possibilities involving extrapolation grounded in available records and the feasible alternatives. A good what-if game should be logical, incorporate the strategic decisions available to the commanders and remain in keeping with the cultural and societal norms of the time period. They might deviate from the exact facts, but they do so within a framework that respects the historical context. So in my Bosworth game, for example, I adhered to the 15th century characters and forces that would have been available to Richard III and Henry Tudor, and although the location is hypothetical, it's plausible within the historical setting. And such alternative histories differ fundamentally from fantasy games, which are typically unbound by the logic of any real historical events. Now, another important point in this debate is the question of historical authenticity versus historical accuracy. Authenticity in wargaming is about capturing the feel, the look and the atmosphere of a particular era, while accuracy concerns the precise details of what happened. In alternative history scenarios, players may sacrifice some accuracy for the sake of exploring broader historical dynamics, yet the authenticity still remains the same, it remains intact. By focusing on the tactical possibilities within the constraints of a historical period, wargamers can engage with a history on a what-if level that respects the character of the time. My alternative Bosworth games, for example, offer a very authentic 15th century feel, even though they diverge from the exact historical record. This approach also invites the question of what role wargaming serves as a hobby. For some, historical wargaming is about meticulous reenactments and learning precise historical details. For others, it's about engaging with history more imaginatively, blending fact and hypothesis to explore various outcomes. In fact, speculative history has a long tradition in academia as well, with historians often exploring what-if scenarios to understand the relative significance of historical events and decisions. The discipline, known as counterfactual history, allows historians to test theories about causality and agency by posting alternative scenarios, such as what if Napoleon had won at Waterloo, or what if Rome had never fallen. These exercises help to isolate factors that played pivotal roles in shaping history and the world, and for many wargamers, what-if battles serve a similar function by inviting players to consider how slight changes might have led to vastly different outcomes. Now, given very recent events in American politics, it's easy to see how future history can appear to turn on a single event, often quite unexpectedly, and that is the phenomenon that what-if games explore so well. Now, another important benefit of these type of scenarios is the creative freedom they offer to players and game designers. By venturing outside strict historical events, you open the door to designing scenarios that might be more balanced, engaging or varied. In some historical battles, one side has a substantial advantage which can make games predictable or even one-sided, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But what if scenarios allow for creative adjustments to give each side a fighting chance, making the game more competitive and potentially more enjoyable? This isn't to suggest that historical events were wrong in their imbalance, but rather that wargaming is, after all, game, and players often value a sense of fair challenge. Moreover, these scenarios can deepen a player's understanding and interest in the historical period by exploring alternative outcomes. And I've experienced this, where an outcome of a what-if battle can develop a more nuanced appreciation of the factors influencing very real events. Players can see historical battles not as static, inevitable occurrences, but as dynamic situations shaped by the decision-making, chance and context. This approach to wargaming can transform players into amateur historians in a way, prompting them to ask questions about how geography, technology, morale and leadership can impact on events. And in this sense, alternative scenarios can be highly educational, I think, encouraging a deeper exploration of historical context and decision making. Now, ultimately, what-if scenarios in historical wargaming occupy a space between strict historical simulation and fantasy. While not bound by the exact details of history, they remain grounded in a plausible interpretation of historical forces, technology and tactics. This blend of history and imagination can offer a unique and rewarding experience, preserving the spirit of historical gaming while allowing for creative exploration. Far from being a fantasy approach, what-if wargaming can be seen as a means of engaging with history in a manner that is both authentic and flexible. So as usual, I want to throw this question out to you. Do you prefer to play strictly historical encounters, or do you regularly play what-if versions of historical events? And if you do play what-if games, do you believe the game remains historical if it respects the constraints, technology and context of the given time period? As always, I would love to hear what you think on this topic in the comments below. So we have time for a hobby update, and Monday saw the usual paint and chat session with several rejigs coming together online for a natter while we painted. Now, I was hosting this time, so we gave Google Meetings a try instead of Zoom, because the free version allows an hour, whereas Zoom only allows up to 40 minutes. I think it went okay, and everyone seemed to get online easily, so it's an option to be kept in their back pocket for another time. And during that paint and chat session, last week's Test of Resolve game was discussed at length, and I got lots of really good feedback to work on. Now, I'm already thinking about the next variation of the Bosworth game that I want to run, utilising one of the now outdated maps postulated by antiquarians in the last 539 years. And I also have a lot of thinking to do regarding the rules changes that I was experimenting with, and any changes that I want to incorporate in the next game. I do like to tinker with a set of rules. Now, as to discussed in today's talking point, playing a variation of Bosworth means I can use all the same models nobles and commanders, but across different terrain and possibly in different layouts. I also may have a bit of fun with some of the event cards, as in some of the scenarios, particularly where the standards are concerned. There's some variations on the use of the event cards that I want to try out. Now, it's been very interesting watching changes to how Wargamers appear to be using social media over the last week. It's been real time and it's been very interesting. As you probably already know, I use an auto posting app to repost my blog and YouTube content across my social media. I've done this for years, and a significant portion of my YouTube viewers come to this channel via these backlinks that I've posted on Blogger, on Facebook, Twitter, and for the last year on Blue Sky. Now, there seems to be an exodus of wargamers seeking a more comfortable venue to discuss wargaming, leaving, or at least mothballing, their Twitter accounts for Blue Sky. Now, I'm still posting on Twitter. I refuse to call it X, but I have long ago automated that function so I don't have to wade into the cesspool to post backlinks to my post. That being said, I have been looking at traffic sources in YouTube Studio, and I can see a steady decline in views from that particular source ever since Space Karen bought the platform. Now, I'll be interested to see if traffic from Blue Sky increases to compensate, mirroring the apparent influx of new users. So I have a Workbench update. Behold, I have been painting. After several weeks of moderate to zero output on the paint desk, this week I have been fairly busy. First, I've been making some 2mm scale medieval village using models from Irregular. That's over here by my coffee cup. Wait, I hear you cry. Why 2mm? Well, stepping down a scale with buildings often looks quite effective, especially if it's possible to have more buildings so that a village looks like a village, rather than just 3 buildings. Now, I've done some 2mm stuff before, including a town and a windmill, but I decided I needed a large village, and these models from Irregular work perfectly. I will also need some Saxon and Viking buildings for my 1066 project, and more agricultural buildings to make some small farmsteads, for instance. They're an alternative when I don't want to have 6mm buildings on the table. Now, the other big project of the week was making textured bases for my mystery project that I've been hinting at for several weeks. We will be using movement trays, and I wanted to make a load of replacement bases for when figures are removed. So some will be plain with just whatever groundwork I want to apply, while a few have either fallen branches, tree trunks, or items of lost or discarded equipment on them. Now, I've been keeping my eyes peeled for suitable items of debris to put on the bases, and if you're particularly keen-eyed, you may be able to deduce which period I'm doing next. All of these will be primed and ready for the painting challenge, along with all the figures that I'm going to be painting for the project. I'm forcing myself not to start the painting, and frankly it's driving me nuts, but on the plus side, I think I'm getting a lot of preparation done, a lot more preparation than I normally do, far more than I've done in previous years for the painting challenge. So I'm really hoping to be able to hit the ground running when the painting challenge starts towards the end of December. Well, that's it for this week. As always, please join the conversation in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.